And hold on. It's setting up our meeting for Facebook Live. Oh, it says we're streaming now. We'll see. We'll see if that's true.
This is how all of your live streams start, right? I think it's going. Is it going?
It is going. It's going. It's going. Look at that. We're live. The problem is, I guess I can only see. How do I get us both in the shot?
Am I not in the shot?
Oh, hold on. I gotta mute this. I gotta mute this. This is nuts. Okay. I think I've got this worked out in some way, shape, or form. So first off,
right.
Okay, so this is Stephanie Patterson, Dr. Stephanie Patterson, and now we're both on the screen.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm like, thank you for being our first guest and test candidate on this. I have not done this situation before, so I was trying to think, like, before I do this with someone who would be less patient, I'll do it with my friend Stephanie, who will have great things to say, but also not be a jerk.
He's very patient.
Is very patient because she's friends with me, clearly. Okay, so Stephanie, you are, I should say, Dr. Stephanie Patterson, bassoon faculty at
the Schwab School of Music. Yeah.
Go ahead, you say it.
So, where are you? I'm the assistant bassoon professor at the Schwab School of Music at Columbus State University.
In Columbus, Georgia.
In Columbus, Georgia.
Prior to that, though, where were you on faculty?
Trying to remember. I was the bassoon teacher at Wichita State University.
That's right.
And that's Kansas.
In Wichita, Kansas. And that's where we first met. However, you're also an alumnus of Wichita State University, and you did your master's degree there, correct?
I did my master's, and I graduated in 2009.
And who did you study with at that time?
Well, I had 1 year with Nick Custer and 1 year with Scott Oakes.
Excellent. Yeah, and Nick Custer now at University of Pacific in Santa Rosa, also a friend of mine. In Stockton. That's right. What did I say? Santa Rosa?
Yeah.
Stockton. What's worse is, like, I grew up 30 minutes from there. And Scott Oakes, who is principal bassoonist with Wichita Symphony.
Yes.
And still lives in Wichita. And then you went on and did a doctorate at where?
I got my doctorate from the University of Iowa.
Although
right. I took 1 year after leaving Wichita State with my master's, and my husband and I went to Alaska for him to study percussion for a year, as you can see.
Oh, that's not your setup?
No, I haven't been practicing my xylophone.
Well, look, we've got a lot of free time now, so.
Speak for yourself. I have no free time.
Isn't that crazy? Okay, so first off, I think it's important in this, like, totally bizarre landscape we live in. Let's just do a little check-in. How are you doing with everything going on, especially as someone who's a teacher, having to now move online? I mean, how are you holding up?
Well, I think most teachers and probably a lot of students can relate that the part we love about school is now gone, which is, seeing your colleagues and your friends and your peers in the hallway and playing music with them and playing music for them. And all of a sudden we're doing everything on a computer. And even though they're there and it's live, it's still way not the same in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. And now it's all it's the part of our jobs that we like the least, which is answering emails.
100%. It's really funny because I was saying, I've been taking guitar lessons do you remember Randy Zellers?
Yes.
Did you know Randy? So I'm studying with Randy. It's great. And we moved to online guitar lessons, and, like, it's going fine. But then, like, every now and then it just gets really depressing because I'm like, I want you to play chords while I play this melody, and we can't do that at the same time. And, like, that's the most depressing part of all of this. So yeah, I think, your message is pretty straight. We miss people. We miss interacting with people. So, well, what I wanted to do, and if people have questions, feel free to chime in with questions. I'm monitoring our Facebook page, so don't worry, you don't need to be responsible for that, Stephanie. I've got your back.
Great.
Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience as a musician with the hopes that our students and potential students and just people might learn a little something from, I like to think about learning from our mistakes, but
So good
also,
at that.
but just sort of thinking about how they might grow and change as musicians. So I guess if you think back to like when you were an undergrad and just starting off then, tell me like are there some things that you've thought about, boy, if I had just done this, I think I would have been so much better now as a bassoonist?
Yeah, boy. Well, so when I was an undergrad, my first year of undergrad, I wasn't a music major. I was undeclared in the college at Oberlin, and it was sort of by happenstance that I ended up at Oberlin at this great music school, and then decided to go into music. So I feel really lucky at that, which was actually the result of not getting into my top like 5 choices for college. So that was my first kind of example of, I didn't get what I wanted, but I actually didn't realize what path I had started on that was going to be really good for me in the long run. And so I do like to sort of think of my career as a series of doors closing and then like another door opens, but you don't realize the door that's opening until you've like banged your head against the door that closed for a while. And then you
Yeah.
turn and you're like, oh, look at this other passageway that goes somewhere better, or somewhere different at least.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I was an undergrad, I did a lot of things that weren't music. I did sports, I ran cross country and I did swimming, which I think kept me sane in a lot of ways, but it was definitely not time I spent practicing. And my teacher, who will hopefully never see this video, actually told me flat out when I auditioned, oh, you do cross country, you're going to quit sports so that you can practice and do music things. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And I just didn't. He probably knew, like you can't hide things from your teachers. He just never said anything later about it.
Yeah.
But that was, there were like whole Saturdays where I was on a bus and then in a meet and then on a bus and I didn't practice and I didn't go to the concerts, that day. And, I could look at that and I could say, well, if I had just quit sports and only practiced and focused on the music thing, maybe I would have, gotten this much better and then gotten into this much better of a grad school. I mean, I went to a great grad school, but I had at
Yeah.
Rice and Juilliard and didn't get into those, so maybe I
Yeah.
would have and gone a different route. But I really don't think I would be as happy if I had just if I had quit all of my other things that I enjoyed, to try and practice that many more hours a day. Which is not to say, I mean, I was trying to practice 4 hours a day, and many days I did succeed at that. So I did get in the time, but one other thing I did was I did a study abroad in Russia, and I was definitely not, getting the same musical experiences, and I was doing other things during that semester. I did take lessons and practice, and I learned a lot, and I went to some amazing concerts. But it was another experience that wasn't necessarily like the straight ahead, I'm just going to do music track.
But it's interesting that you say that because I think you're actually highlighting one of the big myths that we perpetuate in a world of music, in that I will go even so far as to what we define as practice. People think practice is sitting in a practice room and learning repertoire. Yeah. But in my mind, and it's a really important part of practice. And let's not,
right. You gotta do that.
Diminish that. but there's something equally to be said about, I think practicing is going to concerts and listening to recordings and experiencing art in a lot of different places and ways. And quite frankly, doing things like you're talking about, like going for a run and like doing all those things that at the end of the day will make us better artists because we have those experiences. And I don't think if we test tube babied some musician and locked them in a practice room and all they did was sit in a practice room and play and never experience world outside of that vacuum, I don't think they would be a better musician or artist than those of us who did those kinds of things as well. I think all of that's critical. So I think I don't know, I think that's really important to talk about. Like practicing is more than just sitting in the practice room.
For sure.
So when you started a degree in music, so I like this idea that you sort of stumbled into it anyway.
Stumbled, yeah. That's...
And I love that you stumbled into it at Oberlin. I mean, like,
right.
Only because for those of you who may not know, Oberlin's like one of the best music schools in the country. And so it's like, oh, I just happened to be at Oberlin. And they're like, yeah, okay, I'll be a music major now.
Well, and the reason I became a music major was because Nick Custer was teaching my first semester. George Sekikini was on sabbatical in China. And so she came to teach for a semester, and she had done the same thing. She had started as not a music major, and she had auditioned to become a music major. And so when I auditioned to take lessons, she was like, "You really like this, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I really like this." And then she was like, "Well, if you want to do this, you can audition. You just have to practice a lot." I think she said exactly. And then the next semester she went back to Wichita State where she was teaching. But that sort of started my like mentorship. She's been my mentor pretty much since then, since the very first day I met her, my freshman year of college. So, you know.
I want to talk about mentorship a little later because I think that's really important. But I wanted to ask you also sort of, so you stumble into being a music major. Mm-hmm. And what did you want to do once you figured out, okay, you really love making music? How did you figure out what it is that you wanted to do?
I mean, I wanted to be the principal bassoon of the Chicago Symphony.
Okay, and we're not doing that yet. We got time.
I think that ship has sailed. I mean, that's what everyone wanted to do. Everyone was like, I'm going to go play in an orchestra. I'm going to go except for the people who were going to go be a soloist. Primarily not in the bassoon studio. You know, the people going to be soloists, they were more in the piano and violin studios.
Wait, but you're telling me there's not a career to be made playing the Mozart bassoon concerto and it's another bassoon concerto?
Weber.
That's right.
There are some people who have made quite a name for themselves doing that, but they also have orchestral and teaching jobs as well.
There you go.
Almost, yeah. I mean, I wanted an orchestral job, and I think I wasn't delusional per se, but I wasn't necessarily putting in the time and, you know, doing all of the things I needed to be doing at that. You know, like that we had a mock audition at school, but I also had, you know, a recital, and I was making a tape for something, and I had like a track meet or so, you know, like there were things that I was prioritizing that were not an orchestral route, and that's how it fell.
So I mean, and it's okay if the answer is yes. Do you think if you let's just pretend you got the gig at the Chicago Symphony, your principal bassoonist,
I would be miserable.
Well, I mean, do you think that you would be as I mean, forget the location and all that stuff, but musically, if you were just doing that, do you think you would be satisfied?
I think I know that I could find ways to be satisfied, but I think the things that would be the most satisfying would be the other things I was doing, you know? So like, okay, so David McGill was principal of Chicago forever. But he did other things, you know, he played concerti and he taught and he played chamber music, and he did it, and now he's teaching at Northwestern, and he's actually retired from the symphony. So I think there's something to be said for variety, and I think the amount of orchestral playing I'm doing right now is actually perfect for me because so I play principal in the Columbus Symphony, and that's like 7 concerts a year, and it's I still get to play the fun rep, but it's not every week. And I'm not stressing out about my reads every week because I have to play this big solo or this big excerpt, or I have to play as quiet as possible. It's a little more, you know, varied.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I love the chamber music, and I love the new music, and I love the solo playing. And I got to play some operas this year with the Atlanta Opera, and that was insane. You know, it was like we did Salome, and I was like, this is the craziest experience I think I've had playing a piece of music. You know, like,
Yeah.
And that is an experience that I wouldn't. You know, it's the variety is what I love now. So, and I love the teaching part because there's something about seeing a student get something that, yeah, you play your solo in the orchestra and you're like, wow, I sounded so good, did you hear that? And you talk to the audience later and they're like, oh, you had a thing, we didn't notice. You know, like you're like, oh, that's really, but like you work with a student for 4 years and you see them graduate and you're like, you have that human connection a little more.
Yeah, so tell me about your teaching life, your life as a teacher. So what pulled you in that direction as well?
Healthcare.
Yeah, okay, so the reality, yeah.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, no, I'm not. So when I started teaching, I hated it. And not teaching like at a college, but like I was teaching, you know, as a student, I was teaching like high schoolers bassoon lessons, and they never practiced. And so they'd come in and I would like, okay, how do we spend 30 minutes doing stuff if you didn't practice? I'm sure we've all been there. And then well, actually, when I was a student at Wichita State, I got to teach adjunct at a couple of colleges nearby, up at Bethel and at Bethany. And I had a couple students that practiced, and I was like, oh, this is fun if the student wants to learn. And since then, you know, like, and learning how to motivate students, you know, how to get students excited actually is way more fun. And I've already forgotten your question, but I think I answered some of it. Yeah, and then I was just looking at people who had lives, you know, people like Nick Custer and Ben Coelho, who was my doctoral advisor, and Scott Oakes when he was teaching at Wichita State, all these people that were doing the playing and the teaching, and how that seemed to give them a little more like well-rounded musical happiness.
Yeah, right. So I just monitor. I'm sorry, I look all distracted. I really am paying attention to you. I'm
sure.
also trying to make sure that I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing any, if people are asking questions on the stream or not. But you know,
the millions of viewers are all asking questions.
Like, why is she talking to this guy? So I want to talk a little bit about your, also because you mentioned this earlier, like the new music that you do, contemporary music, which is like it's a subset of a subset of us, you know, and I put myself in that category since I'm a composer. I write that weird music, right?
Oh, you do?
And well, not lately, but in general.
Someone told me you were going to orchestrate your bassoon sonata for bassoon and orchestra. Is that?
That is true. That is something that I might be doing this summer.
Oh.
Believe it or not, yeah. So whatever crazy person told you that might actually have a finished version. It might have been. So, you know, tell me how you fell into contemporary music, which is, you know, I think for some younger students, and maybe even older students too, like the first time they experience contemporary music, sometimes they're really put off by it, and some people are really excited about it. Talk a little bit about your entrance into contemporary music.
Well, I do. So at Oberlin, we had the Contemporary Music Ensemble, which was sort of like a small group that played anything from, you know, really tiny chamber music to like large contemporary pieces. And they did all sorts of crazy stuff. And I remember going to their concerts because my friend was playing in them, and I was just like, what is this? Like, this is terrible. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but like it was.
No. And my undergrad, my buddy Robert and I, we would have these afternoon convocations, and one of them was the composer's recital, and we'd always go, so you ready to go to the freak show? Let's go to the freak show. So yeah,
you get it. But my friend who played in the group, she liked it so much, like it was such a passion for her, that I think I kind of like through her started to learn more about why this music was so. Hi, Isabel.
Yeah, that's my dog. Someone rang the doorbell. We have a human interacting with us. Sorry.
Anyway,
Dogs.
so seeing how excited she got for it and like some of the music that she was learning, and I started to look at this music, and I realized that where we think of like Vivaldi and Bach and Mozart as having like rules about how you can play it, which in reality, like we probably have too many rules and we could be a little more free with it. And if you want to know what I mean, you can check out Sergio Azzolini playing any of the Vivaldi bassoon concerti because he's insane.
Okay.
But so with new music, there weren't rules. It was like you just have to take this weird thing that this freak, to use your word, composer put on the page, and then you have to make it sound beautiful. And so that was like the thing that I attached to, was that I could take this thing and kind of reinterpret it myself. There weren't 400 people that had recorded it before me. I didn't have to copy them. I could just play it the way I wanted to. And then actually getting to like speak with a composer was really cool, being like, oh, why'd you write this way, you know? And then them saying, oh, well, this is why. And then I realized that there was a lot more to the art than just like playing the notes and the rhythms. There was like a meaning behind, well, sometimes.
Sometimes we just put the meaning on later because we got to.
Yeah.
So what do you have is there a piece or a work that you remember like early on that you came across and you're like, oh, like it unlocked it for you, that made like this really exciting? Or was it just a series of works?
I don't remember like the first contemporary piece I played. I do remember playing John Steinmetz' Sonata, which is not bizarre by any stretch of the mind. It's way more accessible, but it's very powerful. And I remember
It's such a
seeing
good
that.
piece.
Yeah. It's up there with like my favorite pieces ever. And then getting to meet him later and really talk to him and like kind of understand where he's coming from with his music. But then there was the In Friendship by Stockhausen that I learned actually at Wichita State, and I performed it. And there's a video on YouTube of me playing it in my bear suit at my master's recital.
Yes.
And I just remember that piece, like when I started learning it, it didn't make any sense to me. And then when I got into the theory of it, it was like, oh, like he's just, mirroring and augmenting or making it, what is it, diminuting? What's the word for making it smaller? Diminishing. And they're getting closer together, which is like what friendship is like people getting closer together. So like it actually kind of made sense, as like as a piece of art.
So there, I got a question, and it's a really good one. This comes from Ryan Heinlein, wondering, what was the most important thing you learned in your time at WSU, either as a student or as a professor?
Wow. Hi, Ryan. The most important thing? Gosh.
Or some important things, or
that is such a good question, and I did not plan on getting hard. I was planning on like Alex's softball questions, I learned a lot about working with other people, and I learned a lot about, so when I was at Wichita State, I was the grad assistant, and then I played in the Wichita Symphony second bassoon. And so I was doing a lot of different things. I was like being a section leader, but then I was also in the quintet, and then I was playing in the symphony at night a lot of weeks. And so I had a lot of different hats I had to wear. And I just remember being almost being like too tired to worry about things anymore. Like I was just like, run to rehearsal. Okay, run to quintet coaching. Okay, grab some food and run to Century 2. Okay, do my theory homework for Dean Roush. Okay, get up early in the morning, and so trying to formulate this into something that I learned. I guess I learned how to like just do the job that needs to be done and not worry so much about it being perfect, but just like do it and get it done. And there's something to be said for that. I did also, thinking of the quintet, the graduate quintet was a group I spent a lot of time with, and we didn't always get along the best. And so I really learned how to like play music with people that I didn't necessarily get along with, you know? And I think Frances Shelley, Dr. Shelley was very helpful with that. Dr. Suzanne Turk definitely gave us some pep talks. Andrea Banky was amazing. Like all these faculty that we worked with were really good about being like, just the music comes first, and you can take your personal differences, you know, they check them at the door and you just play music.
Well, and I think, you know, that's really important, especially, I mean, chamber music, I don't know, I've played chamber music with people that I love as human beings, but after a period of time of doing it, hold on one second. Isabel, come here. Come here. Stop it.
I'm going to take this moment to tell the audience that I found Isabel and convinced you to take her.
That is true. So here she is.
Hi, Isabel. Do you remember me?
Look, it's Stephanie.
So, can I tell the story? Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, please. No, you should tell the story.
So I was taking our dog Cleo for a run on Woodrow. Is it Woodrow Avenue? Right off of 13th Street down by Riverside Park. Yes. And this bus driver drove by and opened their window and they said, "There's something under that car over there. Can you go see what it is?" And so I went and I looked under the tire and it was this tiny puppy. And then the bus driver was like, "All right, cool," and then took off.
Peace out.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, so I have this big dog and this little puppy, and I guess I need to take it home. And this was right by our house. So I took it home and Chris was like, "What are you doing?" And so then we kept her in a little box and we kept trying to get people to adopt her because we were about to move. We had like just bought a house. We were about to move and it was like the worst timing. And that's Cleo great. Didn't necessarily love having a small friend sharing the spotlight. And so we kept sending pictures of Isabel to Alex and Emily.
Like every hour.
And they were really cute pictures.
They were. Well, it's like, "You wanted a dog, right?" And I was like, "No." And then, ding, picture of Isabel. You wanted a dog, right?" "No." Ding. And so finally Emily goes, "Well, I think we should go just take a look at her." I'm like, "Fine, but we're not getting her."
And the problem was you brought your kids.
Yeah. Well, and Isabel, as dumb as she is, but is very smart. The first person, when we opened the door, the first person she ran up to was me. So she knew I was the one she had to win over. And then I was like, okay, she's very sweet. And then we left and we went and had breakfast. And then it was kind of like in that good conversation, yeah, of course we're gonna get the dumb dog. So we did. Okay, that's Isabel. So yeah, that's how we end up with Isabel.
Hi, Isabel.
So before Isabel interrupted us, we were talking about making chamber music with people that we love and then eventually start to hate. But I don't know. I mean, we don't really hate it, but it's the dynamics of chamber music. I think there's some natural tensions that exist, but I think that the idea of like at the end of the day, you've got to give service to the music, and you just sort of do that. I also think to help solidify a little bit what you were talking about is there's something about this life of being a musician where you've got to you become like I think you become a Swiss Army knife. You know what I mean? Like you just have all these. If you're a good musician, you know how to play in the symphony, and you know how to play in the chamber music, and you know how to play in the new music ensemble. I mean, the best musicians at the end of the day are Swiss Army knife musicians, right? And even like you're talking about being the principal of the Chicago Symphony, but that wasn't the only gig. It was all these other things, right? So I think one of the myths of being a working musician is that you can just do that one thing. That's all you need, is to just be the best bassoonist to become the principal of the Chicago Symphony, as if that's the only thing you will do. And you just don't, you know? Yeah. So
well, and even just being in that position, you have to be a Swiss Army knife to be in a symphony, because you have to be able to play the high solos, you have to be able to play the low solos, you have to be able to blend, you have to be able to tune to different people, you have to be able to balance, you have to be able to take criticism and work with colleagues. And it's all, especially, I don't know, I mean, probably other people will argue with this, but I think especially as a bassoonist, you know, and especially as a second bassoonist, sometimes you have to be able to sound like a cello or a bass or a French horn or an English horn or a alto flute or a, you know, like you have to be able to do
Yeah.
everything, a tuba,
Yeah.
a
And then you have to be able to do it for
timpani.
Mozart and for, Richard Strauss.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's my next question for you. Aside from your bassoon teachers, who do you think in your history, and it doesn't have to be a WSU faculty member, so don't feel pressure about that. But who do you think, what professor or professors can you remember who were the most impactful on you during your time as a student, either through undergrad, master's, or doctorate?
Wow. Well, trying to remember. I mean, I did a degree in Russian at Oberlin as well. And the reason I chose that was because the faculty were like the most hilarious, interesting people I had ever met. You know, not because I was particular. I mean, yes, the language is interesting and the country is
Yeah.
insane, and the art from there is like, yeah. And so I'm glad I did it. But the reason I chose it was my first semester actually of college. I took a class called The Meaning of Life, based on Russian existentialist writing from like the 18th century, I want to say, where we read a lot of like really cynical, dark Russian humor.
Mm.
And the professor, his name was Tom Newland, is Tom. I mean, he's still there. And he just had this really funny way of looking at like the most dark questions of life, you know, like the questions of existence, and like, you know, like we read Notes from the Underground and Dead Souls and some other stuff, and The Nose, you know, like some of the really dark, like, why are we here and what's the meaning of all of this, and all this really depressing Russian literature. And he was like the most hilarious professor I'd ever had. You know, and like, and just the fact that you could have humor with like really serious content. I you know, it was pretty inspirational. It was something that I don't know. Yeah. So, and then that inspired me to then continue with the Russian and then do the study abroad in Russia and sort of have this love affair with Russian literature and art and music. That is extremely interesting and very bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. A couple, we're going to go into sort of quick fire, and then I'm going to let you go. So, favorite composer?
The one that comes to mind first is Stravinsky, but I think it's actually Goodbye Delina is my favorite.
All right. Favorite solo in an orchestral setting to play?
To play?
Yeah.
Sorry, rapid fire.
Yeah.
To play in, do I have to have played it?
No.
Okay, I want to play Shostakovich Ninth Symphony.
Okay. Excerpt that scares you the most?
Marriage of Figaro.
Worst audition ever?
All of them.
Fair. All right. Solo work or chamber work that you're most excited to play in the future?
I don't know. Your piece for bassoon and orchestrated.
Excellent. I love it. Who's the nicest musician you've ever met?
Gosh, there are so many.
Okay, how about this one? Musician who you met who was most surprising Like their personality is like, you're like, oh, I wouldn't expect them to be like that or them to be like that.
You know, if you've ever met the people, I know you have, but the musicians from Eighth Blackbird are like so interested in talking to their audience and their fans, and I'm always just like, wow, you want to talk to me, like, and so that, you know, I was really surprised because it wasn't just like, you're amazing, and then they were like, thanks. They were like, oh, how are you doing? You know?
Yes, yeah, they are incredibly like genuine human beings.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Okay, if you weren't a musician, what would you be doing with your life?
I think I'd probably be a hermit in the woods.
Which woods?
I'm not going to tell you because then I wouldn't be a hermit.
All right. Favorite place that you've traveled?
Um, either Alaska or Russia.
Okay. And final question, what's for dinner tonight?
Stir fry? I don't know. Noodles again.
Have you guys been eating a lot of noodles?
It's one of the 3 foods my kids will eat.
Oh, don't I know it? Don't I? Now, wait, is it like buttered noodles or is it like
Plain.
Asian inspired?
No,
Plain.
They want them plain. Sometimes I can put red sauce on them.
Ooh, that's spicy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Stephanie, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
I was actually I came up with this idea a couple of days ago while I was on a run. And I was like,
run ideas are the best.
Well, and especially because I hate running, like with every fiber of my being, I hate it. And so I try to distract my mind with anything that's not about running. Like
you were like, what will I hate less than running? Oh, having a Facebook Live event with
Stephanie Patterson. So thank you for doing this, and thanks for and thanks for your patience. And go ahead.
Oh, thank you for having this idea and having me.
Yeah. And if you know other important people like yourself who want to be interviewed for this session, let me know.
Oh, this could be like the challenge. Like I can challenge someone else to do it now.
That's right. That's right. It's the Facebook Live with Alex challenge.
I nominate.
Now, here's the real question, and this is what the irony is. I have no idea how to end this thing.
We're stuck forever.
We may be in an endless loop until I figure out how to end the live. So here's what I'm gonna. How do I stop my Facebook Live? It's because I got out of this.
Don't you do this all the time?
I sort of. I haven't really done it through Zoom, other than one other time.
Do you want me to Google it?
I feel like such a chump. By the way, I just want to say, one of the things we discuss sometimes if students should have a music technology course. And this semester, if it's taught me anything, it's yes, absolutely yes.
But will it include like how to do a Facebook Live event on Zoom and how to turn it off? Or will it include like how to use GarageBand?
All of the above, quite frankly. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to end this. Oh, okay. I know how to do this. Hold on. Okay.
Should I say bye now?
Not bye. To me, though, but you can say goodbye to Facebook, everybody. Bye,
everybody.